Hello? Ooh.
Jesse.
Welcome to the Cleveland Photographic Society. I'm glad to see. I think we're setting new records. Hi, Donna. We're setting new records with attendance here. This is really great. People are finally coming out of their shells. So, before we have our speaker tonight, I've got some announcements as usual. So listen very carefully, especially you guys at home. Everybody, our fireworks holiday boat is going to get released to non-members in probably a week or so. And when it's full, it's full. So right now, only members can sign up for it. So think about that. It's not as far away as you might think. When it says no refunds, don't get too afraid of that. If the fireworks don't go, you do get a refund. But if it rains and they do the fireworks, I can't imagine it raining very hard doing the fireworks. But anyway, you would get your money back then. So we are really rocking it with exhibits. So last Sunday we had our opening reception in Porter Library for the water exhibit, and it's open till June 29th. It's awesome. Get to see some of your fellow photographers' work. And then we have an opening reception at Heights Art on June 13th. So notice the time is 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. This exhibit is going to run through August 10th. The topic is black and white. So if you leave early from there, you can get back here for the Friday night meeting, right? Because you don't want to go home because we have better popcorn, okay? And now, also coming up, just opened up, I believe opened up today, is another exhibit. It's going to be at Chagrin Falls Public Library called In the Details. So in the details might mean macro, but it could mean a detail of texture, some kind of seemingly uneventful moment, something hidden in plain sight, but just kind of get the creative juices going. So you can submit, you have to submit through Shutterscore. If you've done an exhibit before, you know that. So log into Shutterscore, and that's how you get in, put images in the Shutterscore. Jenny, is it 3 images? Okay, 3 images. And then we have June 13th, that's next Friday. It's a Zoom presentation. The clubhouse will be open, and Martin Oster is going to talk about photography as an art form. And Dennis Orton, who happens to be here, is starting up his mat cutting. So I think it's July 25th, I think, is our first print competition. So this is a time to get tooled up for learning how to match your images. And I've done it with Dennis. It's really very easy. We have very economical, good quality mats for sale when you do it. So definitely worth doing. Notice it's at 7 o'clock, unusual. Most of our times are 7:30. That's at 7 o'clock Tuesday here in the club room. And then we have another Zoom presentation by Justin Key, The Photographer's Eye, honing the creative vision that drives us. So I don't know about you, but when I saw this guy's picture, I went, gosh, is he out of high school, you know? But when you read his website, his web material, the guy is awesome. He was in Denver for a while. I don't remember all the details, but got a lot of really good stuff. Yes, ma'am. On, you're right. That's a mistake. The Friday, this one right here. Okay, correction. There's my first mistake. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to make it the rest of the night. Okay, so that Friday meeting is June 20th. Always check your calendar because the calendar should be right. Okay, one of our field trips, Kim Vasilevsky does our field trips and she's just rocking it. We have this one called Queen Wright Colonies. It's out in Spencer. And I tried to go one year and the parking lot was full. She tells me that they've expanded the parking lot. Definitely read the website on this because the one thing that stands out in my mind, 2 things. There's a lot of animals and bees and stuff like that, and a lot of animal poop. So wear boots, okay? And then we have June 27th. That's the right date because I know that's, if the other one was 20th, 27th, sounds good. Doug Hansgate, he's going to do the classical forms of portraiture. It's a live event. You're supposed to bring your camera. If you want to know what that means, I'll tell you. I have no clue, but bring your camera. Live event. Okay, let me get our other presentation up. So tonight's speaker is being brought to us by Pixel Connection, and Michelle, which you probably would recognize, is here from Pixel to introduce our speaker.
So Sigma and Pixel are partnering tonight to bring you this presentation. It's also a continuation that will run into a workshop tomorrow. It starts at 11 a.m. I heard there still are a few spots if you'd like to attend. So she's just going to actually allow you to do more hands-on work tomorrow from what you learned tonight. We have a lot of different classes going on. Pixel not only wants to help get you the gear that you need, but we are so into getting you into learning your gear. We really strive to get you to learn your gear. And I started here at CPS. They taught me a ton. Chris has always done a fabulous job, and all the teachers here. And we also teach classes. But if you need help with anything, you can give us a call, check out our classes, come in the store. We'll be glad to try to help you out because that's what we're all about. I personally, the best part of my job is seeing you succeed. Some of my first students come in and they're starting their own businesses and thriving, and I just love that. That's the best part of my job. So we want to see you learn, we want to see you have fun, and we want to get you the gear that you need. Some of the classes that are coming up, we have a bird walk tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for you early risers. We have Sigma Day. Steph Parker is going to be with us all day long. She's doing the macro class at 11. We also have a baseball photography workshop with Tim Phyllis. That's at night. And we have Pro Photo Day. That is June 14th. And also Tamron. That's an interesting one. They're doing a personal portfolio review. So if you have some pictures, you can bring it in, talk to the rep. And that is by Ken Hubbard. So enjoy the presentation. Steph has been a photographer for a long time. She's so creative, but her biggest passion is this macro, and I love macro too. So she's the Midwest rep for Sigma, and I hope you enjoy it tonight. Thanks.
Test. Hi. Perfect. I'm surprised I remembered to do this. All right, I'm Steph. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm going to apologize in advance. This is the first time that I am teaching this specific class, so I'm open to feedback as well. Again, macro is my passion. I got started doing portraits like a lot of photographers do, and there's times where you just kind of need to turn off the noise, and that's what macro has done for me. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys about this. All right. Get my notes up. Not that view. Okie dokie. So the structure of this class is going to talk more about what macro is, what subjects that you could photograph that would be considered macro, where you should go to find those subjects, and how to get started. So this class is definitely going to be more of a very entry level discussion. Towards the end, we'll do a little bit more of compositional talks. We'll talk a little bit about focus stacking, which is a technique that I have started using in my macro photography just to help with sharpness. So what is macro photography? And I'm going to focus more on the non-technical definition of macro photography first. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll get a little bit more technical. But the simplest definition of what macro photography is making small things look life-size. So being able to photograph the tiniest of insects and being able to see them at a larger than life or true to life scale. Also non-technically being able to pull out textures and colors, patterns. But again, we're going to get more into the technical stuff later. But macro photography, traditionally, people think of nature, insects, flowers, but it can be so much more than that. And that's what I want to focus on here as well. It can be very extreme and exaggerated, ultra close up. But it can also be something that's incredibly simple and still very detailed in its simplicity. but it can also be something that's very otherworldly, and it can cause you to ask questions of like, what is this? And that's one of the things that got me most interested in macro photography, is being able to kind of disguise what something was by making people think like it could be this, it could be that. So ideal subjects. I am a firm believer that anything could be photographed in a macro way with a macro lens, but if I had to categorize it in a class, I would break it down in these categories. And I'm going to break them down a little bit further in. So, of course, nature and wildlife, the bread and butter of macro photography. We have things like flowers, insects. We have landscape details, wildlife, animals, any particular detail that you want to zoom in on, photograph, capture the detail. But we also have urban landscape. And I know there's some people here that are interested in doing some street photography. And I find that when I go out on a photo walk, sometimes I want to focus on something that's not just a landscape. I want to photograph the age of the scene. I want to photograph the texture, the rust. And that's something that I think is really unique to street photography. But there's also this idea, I was having a conversation earlier this afternoon with a gentleman, that nature will always find a way. And that's something that's really inspiring to me. I go into these urban locations, and if you look hard enough, you'll find those nature details in places where you don't expect it. And then we have product. The shirts that you're wearing, your mom's favorite candle, all of these photographs that you see online and magazines, a majority of the time they are going to be photographed with the macro lens, because you need that extreme detail, you need that sharpness. That's what sells the product. Food photography, of course, falls under this as well. Images of food go in menus, go on websites, go on social media. That's how you're selling the business. And every food photographer, of course, is going to have a pretty diverse kit, but a macro lens is definitely one of those lenses, because you want to get in there and you want to focus in on the almonds. You want to focus in on the powdered sugar. It's helping sell the dish a little bit more. And last category is portraits. It's going to be a little debatable, because, of course, a true portrait always going to be better off with a portrait lens, right? Something a little bit faster, something that has snappier autofocus. But sometimes you want to focus in a little bit more on the details. Like, you want to get in there and you want to show just the life that she's lived. You want to photograph the makeup. You want to see the detail of her eyes. If this had been a color image, you'd be able to see the variations of the color of her eyes. So now that we've kind of talked about the what, that helps kind of narrow in a little bit on where you're going to go for this outing, right? You want to do the Chris, what was that you said? It was an art show that was in the detail. So you want to create images for the show that's coming up in the detail. You come up with the idea of what subject you want to photograph. That's going to help you narrow down what location you're going to go to. And these are typically how I break down my locations. If I want to photograph flowers, if I want to photograph the more urban areas, if I want to do some product photography. So a majority of the time, when I'm home, I travel for work. I'm on the road probably about half of the year. So when I am home, there's other things I'm needing to do, errands, catching up with friends. But then I have this lens that I just got for work. I need to do some testing with it. I need to create some images. I have tried and true park locations that I know I can go to. I can get in and out. I can get solid images to use for my portfolio in under an hour. So this is where I recommend for someone that's just kind of wanting to tiptoe in, trying to explore the genre a little bit. Parks are very safe and they're usually pretty diverse. So you could go in and I'm from Columbus. I think I've mentioned that a handful of times already. There's a Park of Roses in Columbus, and this is the season. I can go in any day, and I have hundreds of flowers that I could choose. And of course, the image I didn't choose had a bee in it. So there's times where I'll be photographing a flower and I'll pull back and I'll say, oh, there was an insect there the whole time. It was kind of a nice surprise. So then my personal favorite, my safe place, my home away from home, botanical gardens. If I think you guys have one up here in Cleveland, I'm sure they have some type of membership program. The one in Columbus has a membership program. And with that membership program, I've actually been able to get into other botanical gardens. So I've been to Grand Rapids, I've been to Chicago, I've been able to get into those for free with my membership supporting my local conservatory. And this is something that I typically recommend for when you have more time to kill, when you're really wanting to focus on a very specific technique. If it's winter, which is winter pretty often up here, I think. But just a place where you can go in and you can get a variety of images that you're not going to get at a local park. You're not going to get this type of tropical plant up here on the lake. But just a little bit of diversity. And then city urban landscape. So this particular area is in the brewery downtown district of Columbus. There's a ton of breweries. There's a ton of art galleries. And as I was leaving the bar one night, I saw this art installation and it caught my eye for the flowers, but then I walked up closer and there's all this detail to it. And this is why I like just taking my camera and walking and just observing. And there's something that I talk about it later, but I'm really passionate about doing a personal inventory, personal review, and being able to look at your favorite images and being able to say, this is why I like this. This is why I like photographing this. So then when you're out and something catches your eye like this, you'll be able to see this is why. And you know what to focus on, get your shots, move on. So what really gravitated me as I walked into this image and I saw, I'll go back. So saw the flowers first, walked in a little bit closer. I saw the bust inside the hood of the car, which really just seemed kind of absurd. And then as I continued to walk around, just being able to see again the rust, the faded color, the texture of the car. This is what interests me when I am doing a street walk. I of course, I like doing the architectural type stuff. I like getting a landscape shot when I'm doing street photography, but I'm looking for details like this as a macro photographer. And then finally, this is my new passion or my new interest lately. I've been doing a lot of in-studio work. I'm doing more product photography. If you don't have room in your home, you don't have a dedicated place for it to build an in-home studio, there are typically pretty vast options in metro areas like this where you could rent a photo studio by the hour, by the day, take the product with you that you want to photograph. You have a lot taller ceilings than what I do in my dungeon basement studio, where I photographed this soda can. But just a note on this particular image, we'll talk about it later, but this was photographed using a focus stack method. So I took multiple images and I imported them to Photoshop. I blended them, I aligned them, and it really helps just bring all of the detail in and the background stays blurred. So that way you have an entire product in focus and not just the label or not just the lemons, etc. Another example here, if you haven't been seeing down here at the bottom of the shots, most of these will have settings for what I use to capture the image. This particular shot, the shot previously, shutter speed is really, really slow, right? Because I'm focused on having a larger, narrower aperture. I'm trying to keep my ISO as low as possible to reduce noise. So I was using a tripod. And we're going to talk a lot about tripods today. If you're coming tomorrow to the workshop, bring your tripod with you. You may or may not need it. We might be tight quarters, but it's always better to have the tripod than wish that you had it and don't have it. So now that we've kind of talked about the what and the where, we're going to talk about the how, and that's getting successful exposures. And there are some aspects of the exposure triangle that are more important than others for certain genres, right? For a sports photographer, we're going to want to have a fast shutter speed. But for macro, because detail is so important, You want your aperture to be narrower. So we're talking like f4, f8, f11, etc. Just kind of depends on what your subject is. And everything else kind of will blend together. If you are inside and you're using lighting, like what I was in the studio images, you can keep your ISO a little bit lower, slow down your shutter speed, use that tripod. But let's say that you're out at a park and you're using natural light, then you'll want to make sure that your shutter speeds are a little bit faster, especially if no tripod, right? Most people here are probably very familiar what this chart is. But if anyone has any questions about that, I'm happy to answer now, later, tomorrow. Michelle will be happy to answer today, tomorrow, etc. in the future. So again, aperture is the absolute most important thing in my mind for macro photography. And to demonstrate exactly how aperture impacts an image, I photographed the exact same scene with 4 different apertures, very, very comparable ISO, aperture, or shutter speed, excuse me. And a lot of this is going to be up to personal preference, right? That's the great thing about photography and art. But I prefer going into the f4. You have more detail in the background, but it still separates just enough that you can see what the main subject is. But what do you guys prefer? Which aperture here in the series is your preference? The 4, f4? All right. Are you guys just saying that because it's my favorite? All right, so moving on to ISO. Again, I know everyone here probably has varying levels of expertise, so I apologize if some of this is beyond your experience level, but I do try to talk to the room at large, and there are people here that might need a little bit more discussion to understand some of our exposure settings. So when I'm going out into a scene, especially if I'm outdoors, I like to ask myself, what's the weather? Is it windy? Is it dark and cloudy? Am I going to be using external lighting? Am I using a tripod? And all of these things are going to help me determine what my ISO is. And I know especially if I'm photographing a field of flowers or if I'm photographing just a single flower, I'm going to have an idea of what I want my aperture to be. So I'll use that to help me decide what ISO to go with. And so long as I have a fast enough shutter speed that I can lock and get that nice sharp in focus image where I'm not getting sad, blurry handshake, I'm not getting a heavy camera that's causing some blur. I personally am going to be shooting in between this 1/25th, 1/250th. That's my preference. If I shoot anything slower than that, like 1/60, it's blurred. But tripod definitely can go a lot slower, right? Sure. If I can. There we go. Yes. Yeah, so that's the ISO chart. Just talking about going from very, very bright. A lot of camera native ISOs will be ISO 100, so super, super bright sunny day. When I'm photographing outside, depending on the weather conditions, I'll typically be between 100 and 800. And especially with modern cameras, I'm fine shooting a higher ISO, especially outside. If I'm going to be at 800, especially with Lightroom's denoise, Topaz Labs, there's so many editing softwares that will help with noise. I would rather have more of the image in focus and have a little bit of grain, a little bit of noise. I actually got started with macro photography by shooting film. That was what interested me the most, was being able to see the texture from macro, but also the texture of film. So I will regularly shoot a little bit faster than what I necessarily need to. Are you okay if I move forward? Awesome. Does anyone have any question about shutter speed? All right. So going into autofocus, which is extremely important unless you want to have more hands-on experience, or you want to have if you want to be very precise with your focus, manual focus is always recommended, especially if you are struggling to get your autofocus to lock on, especially if you just want to slow down a little bit more. I know I mentioned earlier that was the reason I got started in macro photography, was to slow down focus, be very, very specific. So with autofocus in particular, I always recommend doing a single point autofocus, or even doing a zone, a smaller zone, if you're having some difficulty locking focus. If you are going to be doing manual focus, please turn on focus peaking if your camera has it. It will help give you just a little bit more guidance with doing your manual focus. You'll be able to see exactly what's in focus in the screen. It'll save you a lot of pain going back and importing and seeing that most of your shots were blurry or out of focus, not speaking from experience at all. Another tool on most lenses have this, but it's really important with macro photography, is using the focus limiter. This will be on the side of your lens. This is basically telling the lens, this is where I want you to be pulling focus from in the scene. A majority of the time, leaving it on full is going to suit just fine. But there have been times where I'm doing a more creative composition and I'm trying to shoot through an object, a fence, more trees, flowers, whatever. And the lens is just really hunting for focus because it doesn't know what to focus on. So I'll use the focus limiter to tell the lens I only want to focus with what's in front of me. So the 0.295 to 5 meters, that's going to be the foreground. Everything that's 0.5 meters and infinity, that's the background. And that's just going to help tell the camera where you're wanting, like where your subject is, where you're trying to pull focus from. There's been so many times where I have been photographing, especially outside when it's windy and things are moving around. I've locked my point and then the dang flower just moves because the wind is there. And then the lens just starts hunting for autofocus, because then at that point you're really close. When you're doing macro photography and you're getting that physically close to what you're photographing, any breeze is going to, or any movement of your own is really going to potentially make you miss your shot. So focus limiter, if you feel like you're having difficulty locking in those shots, try experimenting with it first before you switch to before you switch to manual focus. So, minimum focus distance. Not a ton of other genres. This is something that you need to focus on super heavily, but with macro or up close photography, this is something to really be paying attention to. Any lens that you have at home is going to tell you on the lens barrel somewhere what your minimum focus distance is. On this specific lens that I have with the arrow pointing at, that is the minimum distance from the sensor. That is the physical closest you could be to locking focus. And a lot of people that are new to this, minimum focus distance, they think is from the front of the lens. It's actually from the sensor. And this little icon that has the arrow pointing to it, that tells you where in your camera the sensor lies. So from that point to your subject, that is the absolute minimum distance that you should be able to achieve autofocus or focus at all. Most macro lenses, you're going to be at around a foot. Most standard lenses, 24 to 70s, all-in-one lenses, other prime lenses, those are typically going to be around 2 feet, give or take. So anything that you're doing up close, the shorter the minimum distance, the better. So this is just a super quick review of all of the exposure settings that we talked about. If this is something that you'd be interested in taking a picture of, feel free to do so, or screenshot at home. Again, these are recommendations. This is what I feel works best for me, what would work well for the genre. What we didn't cover was white balance. I typically will, if I'm wanting to do something a little bit more hands-off, I'll shoot on daylight or I'll shoot on cloudy, just so there's some consistency. But a majority of the time, if I want something that's going to be done very specific, if I want to do less work in post, I'm going to be shooting on a Kelvin, and I personally typically am going to be around 5600 or a little bit warmer, just because I like that warm look. Not the orange and washed out look, warm. But anywhere in this range is typically acceptable for macro, so things still look natural. I think one of the things that I skipped over before was AFS, AFC. For most macro photography, your subject isn't moving around that much. So going for AFS or stationary objects, you're just making the lens work a little bit less. But in those cases where it's super windy or the subject you're photographing happens to be moving, AFC is, of course, the best option there for just tracking to make sure you're locking in autofocus. Any questions about this section before I pursue on? Cool. All right, so this is the part where I think I geek out a little bit. I am a tech rep, so I like to talk about gear. There's a ton of macro lenses that we're going to talk about. Most of them, of course, are Sigma products because I am a Sigma tech rep, but there are plenty of options out there, and Michelle can speak to them more tomorrow or later today. I am dangerous enough that I can talk about other brands as well. And then just some other macro leaning accessories that we're going to cover as well. But for macro lenses specifically, there are a few different categories. Traditionally, most macro lenses are going to be in this 90 to 105 millimeters. All of these focal lengths are on the full frame 35 millimeter scale. The lens that Sigma makes falls in this category. Every single camera company, lens manufacturer, they have a lens that's in this category. It's extremely popular. It started in the film era. It's transitioned to DSLR or digital mirrorless. This focal length is always going to be a classic macro lens. If you want something that's a little bit smaller, or you want something maybe a little bit more entry level, you want something maybe a little bit less expensive because this is something that's new to you, a 24 millimeter to 70, those typically exist across most brands. Canon has quite a few. Nikon has at least one or two options. But those, of course, focal length is going to impact your field of view. But for macro, especially when you're using a macro lens, for macro, you're going to be up close, getting detail. You're not necessarily going to notice the focal length quite as much in this case. If there are people here interested in insect photography, this 120 to 200 category is for you. The Nikon 180 millimeter from the early DSLR days was one of the best insect photography lenses ever. You need to be so far away from the insects, especially when they are alive. One of the more traumatic things I'd learned in my journey with macro is that people photograph dead insects. It's super creepy. If that's you, power to you. It just doesn't do it for me. But anything that you're photographing that's alive or that might be easily skittish, you definitely want to be as far away as you possibly can. So going into the super tele macro length, this is where you want to land. Unfortunately, in modern cameras, mirrorless specifically, there's no one has really entered this market yet. There's one lens that I'm aware of that comes from Laowa. It's called the Probe macro lens. It's really funky. Do you guys have a sample at the store? Used to. Okay. Yeah. So Michelle was saying that you could put it underwater. There's a light on the front of the lens so you can illuminate your subject. It really is a very funky lens, but that's also just like what Laowa makes. They make very, very funky things. If you're into insect photography, you have a mirrorless camera, I definitely recommend looking up that lens. I love selling my lenses. I'm never going to try to sell you into one of my products if it's just not going to be it for you. And unfortunately, we don't have this category. We have a macro photographer ambassador. Her name is Heather. She is wonderful. She is a jumping spider enthusiast, and she's been asking our team in Japan for this lens for more years than I could count. So now to move on to magnification or reproduction. That is what makes a true macro lens. So now we're getting into the actual technical definition of macro photography. True macro lenses will have a 1:1 or 1:2 or 2:1 reproduction ratio. And that just talks about how you are reproducing the subject to your sensor. So the average macro lens is going to be 1:1, which means that it is true to life scale. There are other lenses that typically fall in the like all-in-one lens category, like a 16 to 300 and 18 to 400. Those types of lenses will say that they're macro, but it's more that they have macro capabilities. And it'll be at half size. It'll be that 1 to 2. And for example, I'll talk about one of my lenses coming up. One of our newer Sigma lenses has this capability, but there's a caveat to it. For insect photographers, again, going into that 2 to 1, you're going to get twice the size. So that's where you're going to get like the ultra extreme close up. And that, again, just helps with creating a very impactful image. So now I'm going to talk about Sigma lenses because it's required. Sorry. So this is our current macro lens. This is a 105. It is a 1-to-1 ratio. So this falls in that very standard traditional macro lens. Currently, for mirrorless, it's only available for Sony, E-mount, and L-mount, which is shared between a few different camera companies. If you are a Nikon Z user, there are adapters that you could adapt Sony lenses to your Nikon camera. Yes, sir. I have not personally. So, sorry, I had a customer. I had someone in the back ask if I had used the adapter. I haven't, but 2 of my coworkers own them. We are going to start issuing them to all of the techs. They work pretty well. Yes.
I got a Tamron lens, and my Tamron macro lens will not work with the adapter.
Okay. Was it which lens is it that's not working? Is it the 94F?
Yeah, Tamron is a 9.
Okay. Is it the mirrorless design or is it the DSLR design?
DSLR
Interesting.
with the adapter,
Oh, with the F to Z adapter.
correct.
That lens possibly needs it probably needs a firmware update. Are you coming tomorrow to the workshop? Okay. If you do come tomorrow, bring both with you so Michelle or someone at Pixel or myself can look at it. I'm just curious if the lens needs a firmware update.
Red sale last Friday.
Yeah, I was there.
I talked to Tamron,
Oh, to Chris. Yeah.
mentioned
Okay. Okay. Huh. Okay. Well, let me put you at ease here. So the adapter that I'm talking about is different from the Nikon F to Z adapter. There is an adapter that it takes Sony lenses to Nikon Z bodies. The adapters come from it's called TechArt or Megadapt. Viltrox has one. The Megadapt specifically, my coworkers have been testing. They work well with 90% of the lenses they've tried. It works well with the macro lens. The Megadapt specifically is very, very slim. It's basically just a metal ring that sits between the lens and the body. Now, if you're open to testing that, do you guys sell? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. If it's something that you guys are interested in, I do a little bit of time researching. There will be YouTube videos on it. I'm hoping that the next time I come back to Pixel, I'll actually have a copy of one. It's been really slow to get them into our kit, but sure. So I was just asked why why Sigma is not making Nikon mirrorless lenses. It's because Nikon is not allowing us to. So we have to play the game. We have to play by their rules. We're waiting for permission. So we have 3 lenses technically that are a direct mount, but they're crop sensor. And I feel pretty confident saying that most of Nikon mirrorless customers are full frame users. So we are ready. We're just not legally allowed to make them yet. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that we want to, trust me. I would be making this in my garage if I could. Yeah, we want to. We want to, trust me. We would sell so many lenses. Yeah, we want to. It's that Nikon's not playing ball. We're ready anytime that they tell, and it's the same thing with Canon. We have more lenses for Canon, just not as much for Nikon. We're just playing the game. But once they tell us we can do it, we can make them pretty quick. All the lenses are already compatible, so it's just marrying the two pieces. Yeah. Of course. Okay. So we have another lens that did exist in our catalog. It was discontinued relatively recently, but the 70 millimeter macro, this one was also a 1-to-1. This was available for DSLR mounts. There were also some for Sony mounts and L mounts. This is something that you could find used pretty easily if you guys partnered with Pixel or did whatever online shopping you needed to do. But again, another lens that is, this one was available for F mount and for EF mount, Canon, Nikon DSLRs. Another lens that was discontinued with the shift to mirrorless. Just kind of showing what options exist. Even if it's not brand new, you'll still find them in the marketplace as used. If any of these things are of interest to you, Michelle tomorrow can chat and see what's in stock, what's at Nashville, what's in Cleveland. Yeah. Yeah. And if it tells you anything, this specific lens, it looks very different from everything else that we sell. I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with the Sigma Art lens. That's pretty much what people know us for, is the Sigma Art series. Before the art, contemporary, and sports lineup, we were in this like DG, HSM, this very, I don't like to call it super old, but we're talking like pre 2015, 2010, older. We never updated this lens from DSLR to mirrorless. So this lens, we felt extremely confident in its capabilities. And then there's this guy. So this is an all-in-one lens. I talked about it a little bit earlier. So this is one that is 1-to-2. It's that half reproduction ratio, but it's an all-in-one lens, right? So it's not a true macro, but at 70 millimeters, Sigma Japan felt confident saying at 70 millimeters, this all-in-one lens is a macro lens. You will achieve 1-to-2. And I should have put what the settings were for this particular lens, but I'm pretty sure I was zoomed all the way in at 300 to photograph this. So we're getting macro-like images now, right? Macro is a category, but you could also do macro when doing close-up. And I'm going to continue to talk about macro because that's what this class is, but please know that you can still do macro photography by just using close-up and using the lenses that you have. Okay, so now we have some accessories, right? And for some of you, macro might not be the passion. It might not be what you want to invest money in. You might not want to buy a new lens. There are tons of accessories out there that will help give you that macro look, or they will give you true macro. We have extension tubes, or we have the close-up filters. I have a personal preference. I'm going to give you some pros and cons to them here in these next slides. I don't want to make my decision for you. Definitely, if you're interested in trying them, please try them both, see what works for you. But I start with extension tubes. I have the list here, of course, you guys can read. But the standouts to me here are that they are, of course, going to be lightweight. They're compatible with your entire kit because they go between your lens and the camera. So you just buy one set of extension tubes and you're done. You don't have to buy to fit anything specific other than your lens mount. I personally think that they make a higher quality end result in your image. The closer that you have something to the sensor, the higher quality it's going to be rather than the further away. The cons here are, of course, they are going to be more expensive than the filters. There's a little bit more going on inside the tube, makes it a little bit more expensive. A majority of the tubes, by the way, you will maintain autofocus with. Just pay attention to what you're buying, that you will have autofocus capability rather than needing to manual focus 100% of the time. Of course, the other potential here is that you're going to reduce your depth of field, which is pretty important for macro photography. So we have a math equation down here at the bottom. If it's really important to you to know what your reproduction ratio is, there is a way to find out by using this equation. And of course, it'll depend on what your lens is and what the tube length is. Perfect. So now we have the close-up filters. They're the least expensive option, which is great. If you're just wanting to experiment and try this out and see if it's for you, this is a great This is a great level investment. They are really easy to use because they just thread to the front of your lens. But saying that, they thread to the front of the lens, so you have to know what size to buy. And my biggest recommendation is to look at all of your lenses, see what the largest thread size is. It will tell you on your lens, by the way. Buy the biggest one and buy stepping rings. So you only buy one filter. They are, of course, more expensive than a stepping ring. The stepping rings are usually like 10 to 15 bucks. So pretty low investment here. Also small, really easy to store. I'm relatively lazy as a photographer. I like to keep a small bag. So if I'm adding anything to my kit, it needs to be small. Again, personal preference. I think that they have lower optical quality than an extension tube. Also because you're putting glass in front of glass. And I know that there's some people are very hardcore. We don't use filters at all because you're putting glass in front of glass and it distorts the image. For clear protection filters, not as much of an issue, but with something like this where it is impacting your magnification, you're going to lose some quality here. Also, since you're shooting through something, autofocus can sometimes be a little tricky. And I think, again, just because you're buying a single thread size, it's a little bit less flexible with your existing kit. So I am a little bit of an overthinker. I am very type A. I like to plan. I will always be prepared when I'm going out on a shoot, except for the one time I left memory cards at home. So when you go out on a shoot and you're going and you're photographing something that's kind of like a once in a lifetime thing, please just make sure your batteries and cards are in the bag. Bag style, again, of course, preference. I'm lazy. I want a backpack. I want a sling. I hate setting the bag down and walking away from it and then saying, oh, that's a lot further than I wanted it to be, and then be worried someone's going to steal my stuff. Tripod. I have talked about this pretty consistently. I'll be talking about it for the rest of my slideshow. Tripods are important. Macro rails are something else to experiment with as well. It'll help you get even closer to your image while you're manually focusing. There is a style of focus stacking that uses the macro rail as well. I have not personally tried this yet, but I'm very excited to. I know that Pixel sells Nisi, and Nisi sells a very reputable macro rail. I assume that you guys have those in stock as well. ProMaster, perfect. Okay, so we have some options there at Pixel. Supplemental lighting, man, that's a bummer. I don't have, man. Okay, that's good to know. Sorry, off book. Supplemental lighting. I got my start in portrait photography. I'm an event photographer. I'm a stereotype, but I do use flash. And when I'm doing macro photography, I like to use LEDs, constant, handheld, or tripod light stand mountable lights. So this example shot that I did here of this group of accessories, I used a constant light to photograph this in my dungeon basement studio. So tomorrow's workshop, if you come and hang out, we'll be doing a mix of natural light and constant light, especially for anything indoors. I really recommend using lights of some kind. I don't know if you guys have been able to tell, I'm a little bit of a control freak as well. So I want the most control that I can possibly have. Lighting will give you that. Even if you're going out to a park and just having a very small pocket battery chargeable, USB-C chargeable light, it'll help you just kind of throw a little bit of light onto your subject if you feel like there's some shadows that you're working with. Filters are fun to play with as well. Circular polarizers, neutral density filters. Yes. It is. Yes. This is true. Yes. So someone asked about flash photography. Flash is definitely used for freezing motion. You're correct. High speed flash, regular flash. There are multiple options when it comes to lighting. Just my personal preference is the constant light. But flash, you also will, depending on the flash that you're using, if you're using a strobe or if you're using a power pack or even just something that's camera mountable, you'll get more power with some versus others. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. But there are a lot of macro ring flashes out on the market as well that help, and especially with breeze freezing motion. That is important. Thank you. So CPL filters, ND filters. Some of you are probably pretty familiar with this idea. Neutral densities, of course, is going to stop down your entire image, which is great for slow-mo waterfall photography, which I've used a macro lens for. I didn't include a shot of that here, but it was pretty fun to do. I was able to get really, really detailed shots of water moving. CPL is just going to help with reflection, which is pretty common with product photography as well. Again, with the extension tubes and the close-up filters. Personal comfort items, I'm a big one on that. Closed-toed shoes always, just because I'm klutzy, or you're going into places that might be, you're going off trail, just wanting to be personally safe, being aware. This is going to sound really silly, but I bring a towel with me a majority of the time if you're doing nature, flowers, insects, the bulk of that season is spring to fall when it's really hot and you're bending over, you're leaning over stuff. I just get warmer than other people quickly. So I'll bring a towel with me just to make sure that I'm feeling personally comfortable. And I'll actually have towels with me tomorrow because then when you're doing stuff in studio with water, I have a lot of water to use for tomorrow as well. So just keeping your surface clean. Okay, so now we have, of course. Yeah, so question variable neutral density filter versus just like a fixed stop. Yeah. It is. Yeah, I think so. Like, if you were going to go out and you did all of the mathematical equations of, I'm going to photograph on this day with this lighting, I want this particular stop, you get more control. You get more consistent results when you have that fixed stop versus when you go into the varied. But the varied neutral density filters are super convenient, which is why I like them. Sometimes if you don't line them up just right, you'll see cross hatching in them, which some people can be really particular about. But I think that that's probably less often than what people think or what people say. Does that make sense? Okay. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're now going to go a little bit deeper into technique and composition. We're going to talk about focus stacking. And I've kind of mentioned already, there's a few different ways to do focus stacking. The way that I do it is potentially different than other people. Like macro rails, there's a very specific way to use them. I'm going to be doing it with just a tripod. And then we're going to talk about tips to make your composition a little bit more engaging, or just ways to think about composition than just filling the frame, which is very, very common with macro photography. Okay, well, and just so you guys know too, this particular image was photographed using the focus stack method. Well, I keep going back and forth here. As an example, using this image, so I photographed this entire series over the course of probably like 30 images to make sure that I got focus on every single flower, because that was important to me, to be able to show the detail of the entire scene rather than just this one flower here in the middle. So photographically, I did that by moving that single focus point around the screen, taking multiple shots, imported, edited them on the base level in Lightroom. And once I had all of like the base level edits completed, I selected all of them, I right clicked, and then I came into edit in and opened as layers in Photoshop, which then takes a little while to load. And once it does load, you can select all of those layers again, and you'll go to edit and you'll auto align first. And the program will align them together in the best way that it can. It's going to try to maximize that things are level. It might add a little bit to the sides. And then once it's aligned, you can blend them. And Photoshop will automatically choose the sharpest aspects of every image to blend and make the quote unquote perfect image. When you do each step, you'll have I typically will do vignette removal as well. And I do auto stack images, and then that results in something like this that I then move back to Lightroom to export with the rest of the job.
focus on that?
Yes.
And you changed it like for individual flowers now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question was asked if I used a single point for this, and I did. So I took that single point, and I didn't photograph every single flower, but I photographed most of them. So I would have photographed these two pieces up here at the top just because they were so detailed. I would have brought it down here to this peony. I definitely would have brought it down here into the center. And I would have come down here into the edges as well. And a lot of that is just, I'm a big fan of overshooting. Technology is good enough these days that we have the capacity to store all these files. And especially if you have these newer computers, they're a lot faster. They're able to manage the speed and the processing of being able to build these files. So if y'all are coming to see me tomorrow, we're going to have stations set up. I am going to demo this in person as well. And I will try to keep the number of shots on the lower end so it doesn't take forever to load. And there are plenty of additional softwares out there outside of Lightroom and Photoshop. This is just what I use personally. But there are some third-party options that are just dedicated to focus stacking. Here's that shot again, or it was a similar shot, the same product, where I did focus stacking. And here I would have photographed the logo for sure as a single shot. I would have photographed all of the fruit. And this picture here on the right is basically a 100% zoom in shot of this final image, just to show the beads of water still being in focus as well. That's why I like doing focus stacking. I won't do it for every image because that gets kind of boring, right? We're doing the same thing over and over. But for products specifically, I try to do that just because you're selling the entire product, and you want people to feel comfort that they're seeing it for what it really is. It's all a mind game with product photography. So now we're going to talk about composition. This is where I think we get a little bit more creative. There's a little bit more artisticness to it. So the rule of thirds, I feel like everyone here is probably pretty familiar with that. That is one of the most common compositional techniques in our industry. So you have the grid. Your main focus points are either supposed to align on the grid or at an intersecting point. But I think it's also interesting that you're able to have these subjects outside of that as well. It just helps lead your eye into the scene. So that way you're seeing the subject first and not this like random empty corner here. Negative space is a big one with macro as well, just because we're drawing focus to the subject. So we have all of this negative space around here. We're really focused in on this Black-Eyed Susan and being able to see all of the detail in the bud. Golden spiral. I learned recently that the Fibonacci spiral and the golden spiral are technically not the same. I'm not a math girl. I'm a tech rep, but I'm not a math girl. So golden spiral, you have the golden spiral. You see it occur very often in nature and just in how things grow. But I like to look for them as a pattern in a scene. So this particular image, it worked that you have this beautiful flower and you follow the curve, and it really does lead you throughout the scene. It leads your eye out. Leading lines, of course, is a big one as well, and you'll see that occur naturally with trees, or in this case, in a man-made area where you have lots of lines, which I have put here to help demonstrate that as well. Of course, the flower pot is the star of the show, but having all of these highlights and the lines really just leads your eye to that single shot. And another one, of course, with macro, again, I've mentioned texture is a thing that I'm really interested in. Color, pattern, and texture. Oftentimes you'll find some of these compositional tricks, these elements of design. You're going to find all of them occasionally, or you'll find multiples of them in single shots. In this particular case, you're getting a lot of texture. The color here works because of the contrast of the plant against the blue background. You're getting a lot of pop there. And there's a little bit of pattern here too with the texture. But those are things that I'm looking for to photograph, and those are going to help with composition as well. So if you take anything out of the time that I've been up here blabbering about macro, These are this is what I really want you to walk away with. Focus on your composition while you're photographing. I think that it's difficult to sometimes fix it in post the way that you saw it. I personally will take a step back. I'd rather do a little bit of cropping in post and have what I want in focus. So don't be afraid to shoot wider and crop if it helps you get your composition correct. A repeatable thing that I've said, macro for me is a way to slow down. It's a way to calm my brain, turn the anxiety brain off. You're outside in nature, you're breathing in the fresh air. Just use that as a way to tell yourself to slow down and focus on what you're doing rather than what else is going on in life. Aperture is important. I think I've nailed that pretty hard, but shutter speed is really important as well, especially if you're not going to be able to use a tripod, which a tip for tripod usage, please just be aware of your surroundings. If you're in a public place, if it's pretty active, just be mindful if there's other people. We want to respect everyone. We want to be respected. Yeah, but be mindful of your shutter speed. We don't want these sad, blurry images. We want to walk away from our macro outing feeling excited about what we captured. Get creative. I mean, there's so many shots that I see with macro that are pretty repeatable. Or I'm looking through, as I've built this PowerPoint, I'm looking through my portfolio and I'm seeing a lot of the same type of shots because I'm taking the safe shot. I'm not experimenting the way that I should be. And that's what makes photography fun. Getting creative, going into different perspectives, changing your point of view, shooting up, shooting down, shooting through your environment. It just helps create these more artistic exposures. This was not a double exposure. This was a single shot where I was shooting through other plants. But if you have a camera that does double exposures, it's really fun to do with macro as well, if you want to get super experimental. And I will nail this into the grave here. Bring a towel. You won't regret it. Okay, so what do you do now? So we've talked, we've learned, we go and shoot. Use the tips that I've given you to help plan your outing. Again, I like to be prepared. I'm not a fly by the seat of my pants kind of girl. You guys might be. I like to plan. I want to know when I'm going out to photograph. Inventory your gear. Make sure that your batteries are with you. And then also take the opportunity to invest in your kit, regardless of what that investment is. If it's an extension tube, if it's a filter, if it's a new bag, if it's a tripod, whatever. Just invest in yourself because this hobby is important to you, or else you wouldn't be here right now. Post-process and personal review. I mentioned earlier, take the time to review your work so you know what interests you later. I think that's how we grow as people, is that self-reflection. But then also asking feedback from your friends. That's why you're here as well. You're getting feedback from your tribe, from your club. Don't be afraid to ask for that feedback. Sometimes it is hard to get that constructive, not criticism, feedback. When it's constructive, it's met with love. Keep practicing. Learn. We're learning new techniques all the time. I assume that's why you guys are here as well, to learn from friends, to learn from trusted people. But practice. That's how we get better. That's how we learn, and that's why we enjoy doing what we do. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Don't be shy. If you got a question, raise your hand. We need you on a mic.
As you mentioned, it's very seldom that you're outdoors trying to shoot a small bug on a plant and there's no breeze. How do you handle that motion?
Say the first half of that again. I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
You're trying to shoot a small bug on a flower or plant.
Yeah.
And there's a breeze.
Yeah.
And if it moves a fraction of an inch, you've lost your focus.
Right. So I'll do an AFC shooting mode. I'll turn to a faster frame rate. So instead of doing like a single shot, I'll do a burst shooting. And that way I'm taking multiple shots. Definitely make sure my shutter speed is fast enough to compensate for that. And I'm the person that will sit on a plant until I get the shot that I want. If that means that I'm sitting there for 30 minutes, I'm sitting there for 30 minutes. But I might just be stubborn. Does that help?
Come on, don't be shy. What was your takeaway?
We've got a lady in the back. Yeah. Yes. Right. I mean, and you can use the macro rails on a flat surface. It doesn't have to be a tripod, but they are typically like they'll have like a plate that will slide into your ball head.
And a lot of my know Nisi also has a 1/4-20 socket in the bottom of it. So if you don't have a plated tripod, you can use the regular tripod scope.
Yeah. Well, and I think that one, yeah, because then you could just use it on a table and not have to mess with the tripod.
Here is waiting, 35
The macro rails, or at least the Nisi one, is relatively light. Yeah. I mean, you definitely don't want to invest. I mean, please don't buy a $50 tripod off of Amazon. I mean, Pixel has excellent quality tripods that would be capable of supporting a macro rail. Definitely want something that could hold it, but most tripods should be able to.
Going once.
Ooh.
Parker.
Hey, it's like Spider-Man. You can't forget that.
Oh, she's giving away gifts here, I think.
Who's coming tomorrow to the workshop? Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
11 o'clock tomorrow, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 11 to 12:30. There's going to be at least 2 sets to photograph. I have some flowers. I have macaroons. If we get to it, I have some soda cans that we can photograph again. Oh, it is tomorrow.
So Pixel is on Route 83, pretty close to I-90. So within a half mile or so of I-90. Very easy to get to.
Well, there's what bagel shop is that that's right next to you?
Berry Bagels.
There's Barry's. You can get coffee at Barry's.
You have one more gift card?
I don't even know what question to ask. I feel like this gentleman has asked them. I think you've asked the most questions today, which I think that's gift card. That's gift card quality. Thank you. Of course. Thank you for asking questions.
Well, we thank you very much, Steph and Pixel and Michelle. And we'll see some of you tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Thank you guys for listening.